This is Gemara Yevamos Daf Samoch Ates. All the learning has been sponsored as an incredible schos for Shlema v'chadvalei bas Saradina Mirta Shem. The learning of the entire Chabura should ultimately bring chadvalei bas Saradina back home to recover at home, and ultimately bring an incredible and complete refuah Shlema, as well as learning is Choshidei Shalchaim and Devar Tam Siva bas Farach Shalom Levisava Ovik Tateli Shim Ben Chayab Lemudis bas Siva Malka, as well as refuah Shlema Shal Yisven Yer Fedish Momentila Naftal Siva Mechlas and Basivas or Bluma Bas Mendel, Chayim Yeshua Ben Malka, Bashavavego Shir Chana Beseich Shar, Chaydi Yisrael. We're holding on Samoch Ches Amid Beis. We are 10 lines on the bottom. The first word on line is a Gilui Milsa Ba'almu. And the Gemara now asks, we're in the middle of discussing a woman who is together with one who is pasul. The halacha is that she is pasul likahuna, number one, and number two, she is not allowed to eat truma. Now, based off of that was yesterday's Gemara proving and sourcing where we know that din, that when the woman is together and at the moment together means that she's mishameh, she has tashva, she has relations with one who is forbidden. Today we're going to delve into this a bit deeper. Then she is both asur likahuna and pasul from eating, pasul from Tulukuna, and also from eating truma. Says the Gemara, 1 second, Ve'ima, maybe the pasuk that we quoted yesterday is teaching us Nivala lepasala chayve krisos. Maybe it only refers to when it says Havaya, maybe refers specifically one who is, there is an Isser krisos, that's where she's going to be forbidden, and that's when she's going to not be allowed to eat truma. As again, well, we can take this a little bit with Rashi. Rashi over here has many questions as well, but Rashi, about 10 lines from the wide lines, Rashi speaks out. Ask the Gemara that wait, if there's only an Isser Lav, maybe it shouldn't basel her. And the big question is the Kusi and the Basi Minal. How do we know that those three were listed in the list yesterday in the Braisa? Kusi, Nisin, and Mamzer. How do we know that those are apostle? Answers the Gemara, Kisiya Omar Achmana. What were the words that the Torah used? Kisiya Lishzar, when you're going to be together with a foreign man. Hanach Tisbu Avaya. It's referring specifically to those who have Avaya, those that the marriage works. Chayve Kriyas Lavane Avaya. When it comes to Chayve Krisos, is not b'nei avaya, the marriage does not work, and therefore that's not what the pasuk is referring to. Because, as Rashi speaks out, when we're talking about that she's together, she has tashva, she has bia with an ish zar, because the Torah uses the word havaya, that teaches us that it's referring to someone that you could potentially get married to. Asks the Gemara, ihachi, based on what you just said, it's a bit of a question whether the yachi here. No. Iachi, based on, yeah, it is, whatever. Let's just continue. Let's keep it simple. Iachi, akum ve'eved loy lifsalu. Ask loy lifsalu. Ask the Gemara if she's together with an akum and avid, that she should not be pasul from truma. Says Rashi, again, in the first wide line, why don't we say that pasuk is referring to only one who the marriage would work, and an akum and an avid would not pasul her from truma, would not pasler to kahuna. Answers the Gemara, you're right. We don't learn out Akam and Evan from the pasuk, but rather Hanach Basim Rav Yishmael. There's a different source. Amar Rav Yechon, 4 lines on the bottom. Mishum Rav Yishmael, Menayim Na'akad Bevich Aval Bas Yisrael. Val Kohenes Levia Shapaslua. How do we know that they are apostles? Shenamar Ubas Kohen Si Almana Ugrusha. Says the Torah that the Bas Kohen shall be an Almana Ugrusha. As we turn over to today's Daf Samach Tes, the Gemara Darshan this pasuk, for the fact that the Torah wrote almana, one whose husband dies, v'gerusha, one who gets divorced. That teaches me it's only one that the entity of almana ugrusha is applicable. Yatsu akom ve'eved shein la'almanas v'gerushin. When it comes to naka and eved, there's no such thing because there is no kedushin, and therefore they're going to be pasul if a woman is together with an akom or an eved. Ask the Gemara, beautiful. You gave me a Gvaldik Makar for Yisrael with an Akum and an Evid. But I asked the Gemara, for a Koyanes. Ashkechan Koyanes, as the Pasuk was referring to. But Levi of Yisraelis Minal, and how do we know that a Levi or Yisraelis is together with an Akum, a Goy, or an Evid, a servant? How do we know that she becomes puzzled to marry a Koyin and as well she cannot eat Truma? Explains the Gemara, Bas Ubas, Achanami Bas Ubas, extra Vav. Says the Gemara, like we saw yesterday, Keman Kravikiva, the Darshvai. That only works if you darsh an extra Vav. Says the Gemara, no. Afilu Demar Abonik, even to work if you don't darsh in the Vav. Kulubas Kriyiseru, the entire Pasuk Vubas is extra. And therefore, that's going to be the Makar, the Levi and Yisraelis as well. That's together with an Evid and an Akum is going to be possible. Ask the Gemara 1 second, 8 lines down. So says the Gemara, we had a pasuk. From that pasuk, we're learning at a chumrah. Ask the Gemara a bit of a unique question, perhaps, that maybe we should flip the pasuk. That maybe the pasuk is teaching us a very unique kula. Ve'ima, perhaps we should say, as the Torah wrote, Almanu Grusha, someone who has the entity of Almanu Grusha, then then if they have no children, they eat truma. If they have children, they do not go back to the parents' house. Maybe an Evid or an Akum with the concept of Almana Grusha is not applicable. Then maybe it should be a unique chiddush that when you're together with an Evid and Akum, the child born is not considered your child, and therefore you should still be allowed to eat truma. Says the Gemara, no. Why not? Says the Gemara, Imkain, Rebuy Lavi v'Yisrael Amali. Why would we need a reboy to include Levium and Yisraelim like we just said? Meaning, if the whole reason why you're telling me that when you're together with an Evid and Hakum, the child that's born is not related, it's a Goyish, a child has nothing to do with the parent, and therefore you could go back home and eat Truma. So then why would we need a special pasuk like we just said a moment ago? Why would we need a special pasuk by a Levi in Yisrael? If a Koyin would be apostle, certainly a Levi in Yisrael. So from the fact that we have a special pasuk by Levi in Yisrael shows me that we cannot darshan this pasuk le'kula. Says the Gemara, beautiful. Well, now let's go back for a moment. Says the Gemara, why do we need this whole drush over here? We were going on the opinion that you get married to someone who's in Isra, it works. It's only by krisos that it doesn't work. Says the Gemara, that's beautiful, but not according to Rabbi Kiva. Because Rabbi Kiva holds that even one who tries to get married to someone who's only in Isra, the kedusha does not work. So according to Rabbi Akiva, Mikey Sielizar, what does he need the whole makar that we brought down for? So what does he need it for? Kitiba amana grusha lamali. What does it mean? It should have just said kitiba. Furthermore, Almana Grusha Lamali. Why do we need the pasuk of Almana Grusha? So says the Gemara, you know why the Torah wrote Almana Grusha? Once we said Kiti Baal, which shows it's all going to be Aser. Almana La'achmer La Grusha La'akala. We need two different words in the pasuk Almana and Grusha, as Gemara now will explain. When Almana doesn't have children, why? A Kohen is allowed to marry an Almana, a woman whose husband's died. She's a Almana. She's allowed to marry a Kohen Hedyot. She's also to Kohen Gadol. She's allowed to marry a Kohen Hedyot. Avol Grusha do Chaz Likuna. A Grusha which is not allowed to marry a Kohen Hedyot, even maybe even without children she does not eat. And furthermore, a Grusha when she has children she does not eat. A divorce he's not even allowed to marry a Kohen Hedyot. And that's the reason why we needed two psukim, one by Almana and one by Grusha. And that really concludes, we'll call it yesterday's shir, which was delving into the brayso that we brought back down yesterday, is all the different people that this woman being together with passes her to Gehuna and disallows her from eating truma. But I asked the Gemara, wait, there should be more people on that list. We're about 20 lines down. The first one in line is Saricha. Ve'ima, Nivla lepasala. Why don't we say that when it says that she's together, she sleeps with someone who's pasul? It's even referring to one who's machzir gushasai. Machzir gushasai is after someone gets divorced. If in the interim she marries someone else, that woman is not allowed to go back to her first husband. So maybe if she goes and has relations with her first husband, that's someone who's asr to her, and therefore should make her pasul likuna and cannot eat truma. Explains the Gemara, no, unique lish zara marachman, has to be a foreign man. Misha zara etzla meikara. This woman is not a zar, is not a stranger. They were originally married, so she's not included in the cases that will passel the husband from kahuna and asrim from eating truma. Zar etzla meikaru. Ask the Gemara, okay, fine. Then what about a chalal? Chalal lav zaru. A chalal is also not a zar meikara. Loy livsel shana passel. Explains the Gemara. No, amar kroli chalal zara ba'amav makish zar oy loy ma'u passel av zar oy namay passel. That's the reason why chalal is part of the list, whereas machzir gushasai is not. Av zar nami passel. Ask the Gemara further. Ve'im mishas havaya. Now we're going back. Kisiya le'ishzar, which we darshan yesterday means that the woman is together, sleeps, and has relations with this man. Kisiya. And that's where we started off today asking, wait, maybe it's only referring to creases. But says the Gemara, let's go all the way back. Kisiya, what does the word siya mean? Maybe it has nothing to do with them having relations. It doesn't say kitiboya lishzar. It says kisiya. So says the Gemara, maybe when they have irisin already, it should already be aser. Answers the Gemara, dumya de kain gadol malmana makon gadol malmana bebiya fainami bebiya. Says the Gemara, okay, veima adika havayo. Maybe need both. Lamaisa, you're right. We compare it to Kohen Gadol, then you have to have Tashmish. But it said Kisiya. So maybe the wordage of the pasuk itself teaches us that from Irisin, meaning, and if you don't get married and you only have relations, it will not answer this woman. Explains the Gemara, if without marriage, says the Gemara, okay, great. What about Rav Yosi? Rav Yosi Omer. What is the next part of the Bryce from yesterday? Rav Yosi said, Kol shezaroi pasol, paisel. Choshein zaroi pasol, ba'inoi paisel. So the first part of the Bryce yesterday dealt with all these men, the mitzvah, daimi, kusi, etc., that this woman is together with, and we just explained that it meant that she's mishamish, is tashish to them even without marriage, and makes her aser to kayin, and she can't eat truma anymore. Rav Yosi came along and said, no, it's not any person. It's only a person shezarai pasol. But if it's not zarai pasol, then it does not. Says the Gemara, what is Rav Yosi coming to teach us? Because if she's together with a mitzri sheni, that was an isser. So according to Tanakama, she makes her also likuna, she cannot eat truma. But according to Rav Yosi, the child of a mitzri sheni is a mitzri shlishi, which is mater lavai bekahal Yisrael. And therefore, according to Rav Yosi, would not to make her also likuna and also to eat truma. Explains the Gemara, Tanakama and Rav Yosi have the same source. Different dinim, same source. Tanakama hones in on the fact that the tashmish is ba'aveira. So to mitzri sheni. But Rav Yosi Savar, no, go a little bit deeper. Kikoyin gadol himself. Koyin gadol shazar apostle upaisel. Of course, shazar apostle upaisel. Afuke mitzri sheni. Why? Din zar apostle. L'chsev banav sheyodulem dar shlishi. Yavo lahem bekal Yisrael. The third dar of a mitzri is allowed to, yes, come into Klal Yisrael. And the Gemara continues 8 lines from the white lines. Rashba Goimer continuing quoting the Brisa. Kol shatanoi sebita tanoi samunasa v'chulu. Same question we had a moment ago. What's Rashba coming to say? Ma'ika ben Yosef Shimon Gamliel Amar Ula Ger Amayni Umayavi K'minayu. Shavuos is coming. Ger Amayni Umayavi, says the Gemara. Ushneim, meaning, because those are people that Amayni v'loi Amaynis, Mayavi v'loi Mayavis. Ushneim l'lamdu alami kain gadol ba'amana. V'yisi savar ma'kon gadol ba'amana. The first opinion, Rav Yosi says, the detail of Almana L'Koyin Gadol is that the child born pasels. So to over here, Rashbag Zavar, no, Ma'Koyin Gadol Ba'almana She'kol Zarai Paisel, any child is pasel. Who Paisel and makes her pasel, of course, Zarai Paisel, who Paisel, Fuke, Amani Va'amoyavi, the ain't Kol Zarai Paisel, of course, all the Zarai is not pasel. Why not? Damar Mar, all the way back from Ross, and that is the reason why Ger Amani Ma'avi is going to be different. And that is the end of the Mishnah from yesterday. I say better, let's enter the price from yesterday. Says the Gemara, the Mishnah on the bottom of Samach Tes Amud Aleph. If someone is together, either he violates a woman, he seduces a woman, or he is a shaita. All of these cases, she, the woman, loy paisel machlinim, is not puzzle, meaning chuma, but at the same time, these relations don't allow her to eat chuma. Meaning, if a woman is ma'anist, if a woman is raped by a kohen, so normally marriage to a kohen allows her to eat chuma. Says the Mishnah, no, Aynes and Pita does not. And if the people that are together with her are not allowed to come into Kal Yisrael, then they indeed make her apostle kunan from eating chuma. Ketzad explains the Gemara, says the Mishnah, what is the case that we are referring to? Hayrei or Haya Yisrael Shabal Bas Koyin Teich B'Chuma. A Yisrael to the Bas Koyin, what's halacha? She eats chuma. This is what we discussing, that the fact that she had relations does not make her ulcer. Continues the Gemara on Samach Tes Amud Beis. Ibra, but once she becomes pregnant, then as we saw yesterday before, Lo teich b'chuma, she's no longer allowed to eat chuma. And Rashi over here quotes the daf from 2 days ago that says, Ober poisel d'chsev kinureh, that kinureh l'beisavio. You go back home if you're like a nar. But if you're mu'bares, if you're pregnant, then you no longer go back home to your father, the kohen's house, and eat chuma. So Ibra, Lo teich b'chuma. But nechtach ober, if she loses a child in Mayel, then she goes back to eating chuma. Harei or Haya Koyin Shabal Bas Yisrael. If we have a Koyin that is together with a regular Yisrael, Lo teich b'chuma, she does not eat chuma. Because again, just being together with the kohen, the tashmish itself is not enough. But Ibra, if she becomes pregnant again, but Yalda, if she gives birth to Acha, then she's allowed to eat chuma. And the Mishnah points out the math. The child is greater than the father, that the relations with the father who's a kohen does not allow her to eat chuma. But the birth of a child, yes, allows her to eat chuma. Continues the Mishnah, Eved, Paisel Misham Bia, Eved, who's together with the daughter of a kohen, disallows her, asks her from eating chuma by the mere tashmish, ve'enoi paisel mishum zera. But the fact when they have a child, that is not the detail that makes her aser, it is the tashmish itself. Ketzad, what's the case? Explains the Gemara, Mishnah 6 lines down. Bas Yisrael koyin bas koyin li Yisrael v'yaldam enu ben. They have a child. V'alacha ben v'nichva shal shifcha. That ben is together, sleeps with a shifcha maidservant. V'yaldam enu ben, and this child and the maidservant have a child. What is that child? Harei ze eved. That child has a din of an eved, even though the father is a regular yid. But because the father gave birth to this child via a shivcha, therefore the child has the status of an eved and is not related to the father. Haisa aim aviv bas Yisrael. If the father's mother, the grandmother of this child, is a bas Yisrael kohen, she was a bas Yisrael who was married to a kohen, and therefore her whole life she was eating chuma. Why? Because she's married to a kohen. But now her son went and slept with a shivcha and had a child who is an eved. That grandson, the eved, comes. Lo yiteicha b'chuma, makes his grandmother not able to eat chuma. And similarly, bas kohen li Yisrael. If the father's mother is a bas kohen who's married to Yisrael, and who is the only relative alive is this grandson who's an eved, teochal b'chuma, she can eat chuma. Because again, this grandson who is an eved is not considered her zera, is not considered her grandson, and therefore both will disallow her and will not allow her to eat chuma. Continues the Mishnah, Mamzer Baislu Michael, says the Mishnah, if the grandson is a mamzer, then it disallows the Kohen's daughter from eating chuma u'maichel, and allows the Yisrael's daughter to eat chuma. Ketzad, what's the case? The Mishnah explains. Bas Yisrael kohen bas kohen li Yisrael v'yaldom enu bas. The first case was v'yaldom enu ben. Now we have a case that either are Koyens with Yisrael's with a Koyen, and they give birth to a girl. And similar like before it was a son with a Shivcha, now it's the daughter with the Eved. And they have a child. Mamzer. Says the Mishnah, is a Mamzer. So child born of a union of a Goyen and Eved and a Yehudi. And therefore, if the grandmother of this child that was just born, this mamzer that was just born, if the grandmother is a Bas Yisrael Kayin, therefore her whole life she's been eating truma because she's married to Kayin, she's allowed to continue eating truma because it's as if she has a child. Bas Kayin li Yisrael because the child is not Lamaisa Kayin, he has the status of a mamzer, and therefore does not allow the grandmother to eat truma. Continues the Mishnah, Kayin. Excuse me. Continues the Mishnah. Kayin Gadol, Pamim Shu Paisel. There are times that a Kayin Gadol himself, the birth or the appointment of the Kayin Gadol, passels the grandmother from eating truma. Ketzad, an interesting case. Bas Koyin li Yisrael. We have a daughter of a Koyin that marries Yisrael. V'yodemenu Bas that give birth to a daughter who's regularly Yisrael. V'alcha Bas and it's the Koyin and she marries a Koyin. V'yodemenu Ben and the child is born. The child, of course, is a Koyin. That child's a full-fledged Koyin, even though his grandparents were Yisraelim, and therefore he's allowed to become a Koyin Gadol. To serve in the Mizbeach. So what's going to happen if he becomes a Koyin Gadol? His mother, who is a Yisraelis, will be allowed to eat truma because of him, but his grandmother will not be allowed. So there are not many that the mother is going to say, as much as her grandson is a Koyin Gadol, there's going to be an element of negativity, an element of derogatory, because of the fact that it disallowed her from eating truma that she was eating her entire life. Continues the Gemara. Now we actually, not continues, we begin the Gemara on the last narrow line of Samach Tasim and Beis. Ta'anina la'ad the Tanu Rabban. The first thing in the Mishnah, which we said a Shaita is married to Yisrael, Kohanes, it does not aser from eating truma. Why? Because the kedushin to a shaita is not a full-fledged kedushin. Says the Gemara, Tanina Tanar Rabbanan have a right to the shaita v'katam shenisl nashim umeisun shasayim beturais min chalitza umin hayibam. Because it's not a full-fledged marriage, they're not going to have a subsequent yibam and chalitza. Ketzad. So the Mishnah said, second white line, the mere relations allows them to yes eat truma when you have a Yisrael that's together with the daughter of a Kayin. But if she's pregnant, then she cannot eat truma. Asks the Gemara 1 second. We just said that when she's ibra, when she's pregnant, she cannot eat. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. Why is it only if we know she's pregnant then she can't eat truma? Why are we always suspectful that once she had relations that maybe she's pregnant and we don't know about it? So why don't we chaysha she is ibra and therefore she should not be allowed to eat truma? And proves the Gemara Miloi Tanat, when I learned in the Mishnah Mafrish and Chadashim, a big siga that we dealt with at length, that any time one is remarrying someone else, you have to wait 3 months. The 3 months of Avchana, to make sure that any child born will know who the father is. So we see that every time the couple is together, we are chayshish that there's a child. So why here are we not? So says the Gemara, the first teretz on the fourth white line, Amar Rabbi Ravuna liyochsin chashashu, l'truma lechashu, liyochsin. You're right. When it comes to figuring out who this kid's father is for the lineage, then we're chayshish, and therefore we make them wait 3 months for getting remarried. But l'truma, we're not as concerned. We allow them, and therefore we don't say that this Bas Koyin is usher to eat truma unless we see and know she is pregnant. Ask Gemara why? What's the reason we're not concerned by truma? Vatanya, or I say better, we see in our brayso that we're yes concerned by truma. If someone gives a get and says this get goes into effect 1 moment before I die, says the Mishnah Gein Asura Lechel b'truma miyad. She's not allowed to eat truma. Why not? Because every moment we're worried maybe this is the moment before she dies. So what do we see? We see that with regard to Truma, we are chayshish and we take it the possibility what might occur. So why in our case do we not? Explains the Gemara, when there's a couple that's together, they're married, then every tashmish there's a concern there will be a child. But by zinos, we're not chayshish. The reason is, explains Rashi, because by zinos, the woman does whatever she has in her power. As we've seen before, let's look at the Rashi for one moment. Rashi is in the second wide line. Rashi says, as we've seen, Isha mizana misabeches kadesh lo tisaber hilkach leka safik. That when a woman is mizana rachmana litzlan, what does she do? After the act of zinos, she turns herself over to clean herself out to ensure that she's not pregnant. So says the Gemara that by kedusha we are chayshish, you're right, but by zinos we are not. Ask the Gemara further, are we really chayshish by nisuin? V'atanim learned in a brayso bas kodesh Yisrael. Umeis tayvels v'chaz b'tshuma l'erev. Boom! Right away, she's allowed to eat truma. Why are you allowed to eat truma? We just said that whenever there's a marriage, we are chayshish. Explains the Gemara. Amar Rav Chisda, about 20 lines to the bottom. The first line is teveles. Teveles oicheles ad arbaim. Doesn't mean you could always eat. It means until day 40. Because after 40 days, we'll know if she's pregnant. Loy me'abra, loy me'abra. V'im'abra ad my arbaim ad arbaim mayabalmu. And let's say she's really pregnant, and we just don't know about it until day 40. It doesn't have a din of a child. It's mayabalmu. Similar as we know that a miscarriage within 40 days doesn't have a din of a child, so too over here in the Frishadi Truma for the first 40 days. Amrle Abaya asked Abaya and Rav Chisda Yachim a say for the end of that price it says Hoker Ober B'Meyaho Temakol Lemafreya. If we see that she was pregnant, the Lemafreya retroactively she becomes Mekulkeles, she becomes messed up, that anything that she ate was incorrect. Ask the Gemara why? We said only until from 40 days. Explains to my Uriah and my Mekulkeles ad arbaim. It means only from the last 40 days. Says the Gemara Itmar. Let's begin the next sugya, and this is how we're going to call it a day. About 15 lines to the bottom. The first one line is Haba. Haba Rusasa of one who has a illicit relations. He sleeps together with his Arusa, the woman which they did Iris into engagement in her father-in-law, in his father-in-law's house. So we have a machlekes. Rav Amravlan Mamzer Shmuel Amravlat Shtuki. Amar Rav Misav Milsa to Rav. I'm going to prove Rav. Rav said if someone is engaged and they sleep together, a child that is born from that union is a mamzer. Says Rav, I'm going to prove Rav. Didamya me alma. That the case of Rav says Rava is when Didamya me alma, this woman that had this child is suspected of being mezana la alma to the world. But if there's a case in which there's no suspicions about this woman, and the only suspicion we have is we know that she's together with her arus, then we say no, the child is not a mamzer, and rather the child goes after the father. Where do I know this then? That if she's suspected of being mezana to the world, then Rav says it's a mamzer. If she's not suspected, then it goes after the father, the arus. How do I know that? The Ketani, it said in a Mishnah, our Mishnah, Yolda Te'achal, that what happens, she gives birth, she's allowed to eat Truma. Why? Because we assume that who is the father of this child? The Kayin. Hey, Chidami, what is the case of the Mishnah? Ilaim with the Damya Me'alma Yolda. If the case referred to the Damya Me'alma were chayshish that she had relations to someone else, she was Mizanistam, Yolda Mai Te'achal. So after the child is born, why should I eat Truma? Elala Binei Damya. We heard that she was together with him. Still, we say it goes after him, and she can eat truma. In our case, and this one is that Tira doesn't mean it's really Hatter, it means it's the Aros. Therefore, Lo Kolshkein, and certainly we're going to say the child goes after him, and that is Rav Vos Raya to Rav, that the din that we're going to say the child is a mamzer is only if there's no suspicions about this woman that she's been found into the world. We're going to end over here. I'll pick it up from here in the next year. V'siyata Dishmaya.